My name is Miranda Kelly. My ancestral name is Tilyen. I'm Stalo from Sewali First Nation, and I'm really honored to be here hosting this session today. And our presenter today is Shirley Morven. She comes from Nisga'a territory. She was sent to St. Michael's Indian Residential School at the age of 10 and learned to read English when she was in grade 7. And her education journey did not stop there. She went on to get a Bachelor's of Education in Special Education from UBC and her Master's in Education in Multicultural Education from the University of Washington in Seattle. And she did some theory work for her doctoral degree in leadership from Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're really honored to have you join us today, Shirley. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it on to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll see at the top of the page our letterhead for Nisga'a government, and on the lower right-hand corner you'll see our logo. I did all of this writing in my office at Nisga'a government. I want to start with a small discussion about the Fraser Institute. I'm just going to read what I wrote this morning. In 2008, Nisga'a government was in the process of moving back into the world. Implementing our Nisga'a Final Agreement components was well on its way. Proponents were discovering our worth. Our strategies were being configured with sensitivity so that whatever we were doing had to be a benefit for all of British Columbia and Canada. Also in 2008, the Fraser Institute ranked our school district 266 out of 267. This brings to mind what a women's studies student said when we were watching a video called Duncan Campbell Scott and the Indians. In it, as he's in the process of herding all our people onto reservations, he lost his daughter. She died when she was 12. And she said, "Karma, yes. However, what the government has done, what they did back in the 1800s, lasts as we go into the 3rd decade of this century." Picture this, the Fraser Institute, and imagine in your mind a map which shows School District 92, a small area in northwest British Columbia. Put a line around that school district. The implication by Fraser Institute is that this geographic area contains all mentally challenged children. That's not an ordinary phenomenon, but according to the Fraser Institute at that time, we were a group of idiots in the north. And no matter how we say that we disregard the Institute's unreliable and invalid testing results, over time, as with the Duncan Campbell Scott rationale and decision, it is still out there where there are people who are gullible enough to believe it, to readily believe it. The damage can only be rectified when individuals begin to realize that our children are like other children and they do love to learn. The presentation presentation I'm going to show you is a record of how I taught in school. And the students that I taught back in the 80s are now working in village and Nisga'a government and in other places, including Simon Fraser University and in doctors' offices across Canada. And so I'm really proud to say that I had a small part in their learning. Much of what I teach is not taught in schools. I learned some things about learning when I was at the University of British Columbia. And one of the things that I learned when I was there was back in 1980, 81, and 82, and 83, there's something called cognitive styles or thinking styles. Some people have a circular thinking style. They keep all of the information that they gather and they use it. If you ask someone a question, they will describe a number of things to you, and somewhere in there is the answer that you're looking for. So when, for example, when you or your students are interviewing others, the magic word here is patience, because eventually you will get the information that you are looking for. And they remember things. For instance, that was, if you ask them, do you remember that we went out to terrace just before Christmas, and somebody will say, oh yes, that's the time this kind gentleman gave me $20 for my lunch. And so it sounds puzzling, but what she's doing is she's linking the question she's asked is, do you remember? And so she gives you a description as an answer, because her remembering is linked with the action of someone. And so when you hear this type of reply, sometimes you wonder, what's the matter with her? Why is she talking? And she's talking like that, or he's talking like that, because he's a circular thinker. And he always will link an answer with some event or other, or a catastrophe. We were, as Nisga'a, predominantly circular thinkers. And this is something that people don't seem to understand. A circular thinker is not working at a deficit. And a circular thinker is not an inferior thinker. They think differently. Difference has a reason. And it's not because they lack intelligence. Other thinkers are linear thinkers. They go along, they learn, they read a book, they see something, they have information in their head. As soon as they learn new information, they'll reprogram what they have in their head and discard other stuff that they had before. And they think along the line, it seems. They use analysis when they solve problems. Most learning resources in schools demand that we use linear thinking. And the reason for this is that they believe that linear thinkers were superior thinkers. They're not. They think differently. They're not superior and they're not inferior. They are different. Anthropologists have stripped from our Agawa for our stories all the description in anthropology book. All you see is a skeleton, an outline. of it. So consequently, much of our language and from our songs and from our history, how we are in our circular thinking skills. I'm going to help our students, or I did help our students, so that they could have a balance of both circular and linear thinking to help them along the way in their lives. The academic exercises that I use include revitalizing our Agawa with descriptions of settings, human character traits and animal behavior, the weather, and other things like that. There's another has to be addressed when you are working with children, and it has to do with locus of control. Locus of control is how we see who or what is in control. And it works along a continuum from internal to external. And all of us fit somewhere along this line at some time or other. We're in different places. A person with an extreme internal locus of control believes that the sun and the moon were created to rise and set over. And a prime example is one of the candidates that's running for president in the United States. And total control, he believes that he can do this. Others have external locus of control. And this is one of the symptoms that we have because of the colonial conditioning, the regimented conditioning that was imposed upon us for over a century at the residential schools. And it takes a long time for people to understand that they do have control, but there's a way in which to begin to inculcate the skills with children at the schools. Traditionally, we Nisga'a believe that Angaye'e gave us all that we have. That's our name for our higher power. And it means that we had an external locus of control because we believe Angaye'e had all the control. And this is before we realized that he gifted us with the skill of control. We honored and upheld this great creator. We knew we had to appreciate all that we were gifted with: land, wisdom, children, and one of the very important things that children brought with them that made them so extremely special was that they brought back memories from the ancient ones. They were born with these, and they were born with many talents as a result of that. But we had a really different relationship with Angaye'e. Although he was the supreme spirit, the supreme power, if we were upset and angry with him, we could cuss him out, and we could tell him in no uncertain terms what our concerns were. This is traditionally how we communicated with Angaye'e. And so it's different from the way it's done in some of the religious denominations around the world. So we had what I call a holistic relationship with Angaye'e. Now I go back to locus of control and teaching children how to practice and to change their idea of who is in control. One of the professors that I had at the University of Washington explained how you develop internal locus of control, and it was done in the 80s, and he was one of the proponents for this. And they worked with Chicano children, and they began very simply with questions like this. When you walk in the rain without a coat, what happens? That's a cause. And the child will say, well, I got my hair wet, or my shirt got all wet. That's the effect. When you complete your homework, what happens? And they described how they felt. I felt really good. I felt happy. And so they learned that for a positive achievement, there's a positive reward. So there's cause and effect. And this, it's gradual the way this is taught to children. When you ask the teacher for help, what happens? The teacher helps me, or the teacher ignores me. And you begin to discover how the child is treated in the classroom. That's not your purpose. Your purpose is to teach them how to gain control of their educational rights. And eventually what will happen is there'll be a little dialogue between a child and whoever is teaching them how to develop internal locus of control. The objective, of course, is to raise the learner's awareness of this phenomenon, that's what I call it, and to train him and her to be proactive, to begin to take control of how they see themselves in any situation. And at this time it was simply to teach them how to gain control so that they could get higher grades in their courses. And you and I, sometimes we're extremely external. For instance, if you've been exposed to something for the very first time, and you're totally puzzled about it, and you say, I don't get it, I'm lost, and you're frowning. And inside, mentally, something tells you you're not in control and you're used to having control. And so the other one is that we can be really internal. And we're at a meeting, we're discussing something. Some people are external and they're not prepared to do something, and you say, oh, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. So you're being an individual with more of an internal locus of control. Forgive my little graph, it's not the way it should be. And perhaps you have an even more loosey-goosey graph on your, in a copy that you might have. In the 1970s, Dr. Brown, forgive me for not remembering his name, but he was this was one of the papers that absolutely made so much sense to me. And I'll walk you through this, and I'll see if I can explain it to you. All children, or most children love to learn. They will learn even when illustrations of humans are of mainstream people. However, it has been shown that they can mentally drop out in grade 2 when they're 7 years old. And this is a puzzle because when First Nations children start kindergarten, generally they are one grade level above, they're at the grade 1 level in their knowledge, above the mainstream kindergarten child who is at 0 and is just beginning to learn. And they learn, and they have little ducks, and they've got little cartoons, they've got all kinds of other people that are there that help them. And the Indigenous child, by grade 2, doesn't see anything relevant there, begins to discover that all the little kids and all the people in the pictures look like my friends who are mainstream kids. And so they begin to withdraw. And by grade 2, it's as if their thinking regresses. They begin to block the information that they are getting. And then if they are fortunate, and this phenomenon is going down, is the beginning of the cultural crossover event. And then they get into grade 3. They have a teacher who is teaching some culturally relevant information using culturally relevant visual aids, using culturally relevant examples and experiences to pass on information to the child. So the child crosses over again in about grade 4, and they are mentally just beginning to learn again. They want to learn, but they have to catch up. And between grade 3 and grade 4, they're back on the plane, but their learning, their gathering of information is behind. And you know that children are tested for what they learn. And so they were measured at being again at the kindergarten level. And then by grade 4, they accelerate. And now they're at grade 4, they're now working at the grade 2 level. So in 1 year, they've jumped 2 grade levels because of the culturally relevant material. By grade 12, they accelerate beyond their mainstream cohorts because they now have developed their intellectual skills, and they're generally ready for university before their mainstream cohorts are. In fact, it was shown that by grade 10, halfway through grade 10, they've surpassed the intellectual skill abilities of grade 12 mainstream students. And the only difference was that they were given culturally relevant learning resources to use. The intellectual skill development exercises were the same. You ask them questions, they give you answers. You ask them to compare something with something, they learn how to do that, they give you the correct answers. It's the big error in education in British Columbia was that they focused more on people's ability to remember information about mainstream issues. And they neglected to focus on the intellectual skill development of the learners, all the learners. In the classroom, teach children politeness words so that absolutely nothing would disrupt their learning. And I didn't want to talk at them and say to them, oh, you have to do this, you've got to be this way, and so on and so forth. And when they first come in, they use words like shut up and everything like that, but they got rid of it without me telling them that they had to get rid of it. And the very first thing, the most important thing back in the 80s that I taught them was I wanted them to learn differently from me. I didn't want them to have regimented learning. So I just peppered the exercises with choices. For the whole first month, every little thing, every exercise had to have a choice. I might put up there about 7 or 8 questions, and I say to them, this is classwork. And they look at it. I said, you have a choice. You can do either the odd-numbered ones or the even-numbered ones. And then they smile, because now the work is cut in half, they think. Or I might say to them, okay, this is a project. It's a big project. It has to be finished in class. So you have a choice. You can have 2 people who come to help you, to work with you. You can choose the 2 people that you're going to work with. And you have to work together and finish this by the end of class. An assignment is due. You have a choice. You can hand it in the same day, or you can hand it in on the due date, which is day after tomorrow. But you have a choice. Day after tomorrow has 24 hours in it, and you can choose to give me the assignment during any one of those 24 hours, day after tomorrow. And those are some examples of the kinds of choices that they had, and even for a project, I'll show you later the examples that they used that picked for choices. The one thing that I remember at St. Michael's School was that we couldn't ask for help, because if we did, we were called weaklings. And so I decided I'm going to let these kids understand why people get strong. And so I wrote on the board, strong people ask for help. And some of them were afraid to ask questions. And so I taught them, they thought that if they asked questions, people would see them as being stupid. So I said to them, no, smart people ask lots of questions. I wrote that on the board so that they could see it. And they didn't hesitate after a while to ask questions. And sometimes they would see if I would really need the answer, and they would ask me something really totally irrelevant and just having nothing to do with anything, and I would have to answer. But I liked that, because what happened was that sometimes they would ask me a question and I didn't have an answer. So it was a prime time, teachable moment to tell them, I don't know the answer for that, but I will ask someone who does. And so you show them that you are a smart person and you ask questions from somebody else as well. And they know that teachers don't know everything, because some kids, when they're little, they think the teacher knows everything. One of the things that they had to discover for themselves was the idea of self-respect. And I did a tiny little 5-minute lesson on that. And they had to learn. If you, as I say to them, if you go on you yank somebody's hat off his head, who are you hurting? And they say, and then I say, no, You have no right to another person's belongings. But who are you really hurting? And it takes them a while, but then they learn, well, I'm hurting myself. And so I tell them, how are you going to be? How are you going to behave from now on so you don't hurt yourself? And then that gradually comes to them, that eventually they build the idea of self-respect. And it's reinforced at every opportunity when they're in the classroom. And the prime rule, of course, in the class is that you have to finish everything you start. And when I give them an example of what happens when you don't do this, I tell them the story about how when I used to knit, I would start a sweater, the back of a sweater, and it would look really nice. And then I would see another pattern, and I would do a back of another sweater. And I got up to 9 sweater backs, and my sister Dorothy said, "Oh, here comes the sweater back knitter," and I didn't have any sweaters at all. And so I tell the children, no, you could get labeled if you don't finish what you start. You want that to happen to you? And of course they don't want that to happen. And so they practice learning how to finish what they begin. Often they used to say things like shut up. And so I thought, well, I've got to increase these guys' vocabulary. So I picked a really long sentence, and it sounds more classy, I tell them. And so they practice saying, cease your excessive verbosity. And that means the same thing. And they use it. They really like to use it. And they use it a lot. And the other one is they come in and they're dripping wet, and they talk about the GD rain again. So I teach them to say instead, and they have more fun about the rain after. I teach them to say pluvia is pelting down in copious drops. And so they learn to say that instead of saying the GD rain. They learned, and then they wanted to know about snow, and I didn't really have anything about that. So they had 4 months to learn how to say, to describe the snow instead of saying, oh, we got stuck in the ditch or blah, 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 and so they learn how to speak with greater authority using new language, and they forget how to be rude with anything, with the environment, with each other, and with themselves. So those are called magic words and politeness words. This might be different from what you see. I tried to structure marking such that at the beginning, while they're developing and relearning the good habit of finishing what they begin, 90% in September, 90% of their mark comes from classwork. There's no homework. I read a book to them, a novel study, but it's just for entertainment. It's one of the 8 or 10 books that used to be mandated for the grade 8s to read. And then, because it's only the beginning of the year, and we're doing only basically retrieval and recall, their marks for their quizzes are short. And in the quizzes and the tests, they have choices too. They don't have to answer every single question. And they're taught how to write tests at this time. I will scatter the known work throughout the test, and I'll put something on there they may have learned in grade 7 or that they might learn in grade 8. I fixed it, I padded with this so that they will know which choices to make. And they make the choices, and I do the same thing both for the quizzes that I might give them a quiz in the middle of the week. Or I might give them a quiz at the beginning of the next week. But our tests are end of the month, and that's how it's done. And in October, I cut the amount of the percentage down. They're very confident and competent now of making choices and completing their work. And so now they get a little bit of homework. But I'm generous, I give a big percentage for the homework. And they begin to have marks for novel studies. And the quizzes and the tests, the value of them increases. And now I don't just circle the things, for example, like run-on sentences and that kind of thing. I don't just put down there what a long sentence. I don't do that. I now give them a percentage for their grammar. And so it goes, and it goes like that through the whole year. The percentage of mark that goes toward classwork is gradually reduced until it goes all the way down to about 30-40% of their mark. And where I want them to do more and more independent study, I give them a higher mark. And this seems to help them to do better work. And it went to the point where when I was having coffee one day, the business education teacher came to me and said, "Shirley, you know what I saw in my class today?" And I said, "What did you see?" "One of your students was doing his homework during my class time." And I smiled at him and I said, "Hey, it's schoolwork in school time. And it doesn't matter which room they do it in." And of course, he didn't really appreciate that. But eventually, that's important for them to know that we're interdependent. And if children are choosing to do schoolwork in someone else's room, there's nothing unethical about that. It's their choice, the children's choice, to complete their work wherever they are. These are the intellectual skills that are usually taught in schools. I'll just let you read that.
Oh.
These are the intellectual skills, not usually a focus of school.
Is he freezing?
There's quite a bit.
Oh, one of my words is missing.
Do you want to tell her?
Just forgive me here. Well, analysis is missing off that list. I'd appreciate it if you could add that.
Are you going to tell her?
Can you add to the slide? No. After.
Now I would like to go on and give some examples of the kinds of work that children did. In grade 8, back in the day, we had to teach about ancient history. And to make it interesting for the students, rather than, talk about how the Spartans fought with the Athenians and all this stuff. We did this first before we did anything else with those chapters. And the approach I used here it was really well worth it. You have to start with the knowledge that the child already has. And then you introduce information as you go along. And the information is like a stepping stone toward the independent work that the child has to do. And of course, back in the day, when we talk about culture heroes, they really liked the Hulk. And of course, they have to describe the Hulk and to tell me. And going from what they know encourages public speaking in class, and it's spontaneous. It makes it more spontaneous. And you don't have children sitting around slouched in their chairs watching the one and only kid who might be able to give an answer. They're just all really eager to share the information that they have about this one culture hero. And so they talked about the Hulk. And I couldn't write fast enough all of the information that they were sharing about the Hulk. And you introduce the word quality because you're helping to increase their vocabulary. You introduce the word appearance and culture hero. And you define culture, although they already know it, they already have a hero. So this is the local work, the local knowledge that they have. This is the vehicle you use to encourage spontaneous discussion. This is where you introduce a concept, and they focus only on the positive, what a culture hero is. And now for the next 3 lessons, I go into culturally relevant information. It's still local, but to these children it's unknown. And they will discover a broader concept of hero. And at this stage, they will discover that a hero is not a superhuman thing like the Hulk. They will discover in the stories of Khamsam, who's our local hero, they'll discover that Khamsam sometimes is really silly, and sometimes he's very weak. Sometimes he's a copycat, and sometimes he's really tricky, and a lot of times he's very brave. They learn all this. They have no idea what he looks like. And so you're using this as a vehicle for them to create and to describe their idea of what Khamsam must have looked like. And they're to eventually do an illustration of Khamsam and write a brief paragraph with descriptors in there about Khamsam. They learn how to say Khamsam properly. And they learn a few words like elch for seal, ox for sun, milks for steel. These are words that they are also learning in Nisga'a language. And so they see now that there's an integration of learning that happens because they're learning Nisga'a and they're learning history at the same time. And after we've walked through all of these and discovered and rediscovered and decided our own culture hero image, the next thing they do is they go to the library And I don't have to even tell them what they have to look for. All I say to them is go and look for a culture hero. And they already know what the qualities are of a culture hero. And then they know, because they've explained, and they know how to explain about handsome and about the health, they won't hesitate to describe to you the culture hero that they have selected to describe from the information in the library. And parts of this will be on their test. And often on something like this, where they've had a skewed image of a hero, their test will be an agree-disagree test, which is the same thing as true and false. If they agree with the statement that they read, they don't add information. If they disagree with a statement that's written on the test, they have to provide a more accurate piece of information. And so what it does, it firmly sets in their minds a brand new image. And it gives them an opportunity to give an opinion or not to give an opinion. And I tell them that there are no wrong answers in an agree, disagree, because there are multiples of information that can be used to agree or disagree with in such a test. It's an excellent one, and the work was spontaneous. The children didn't even take any longer than 20 minutes, and they were finished with the work here. And their marks were just excellent. And in some of these exercises, they mark each other's work. And if they find a mistake, they put a circle around it. They don't put a big X or anything. And they have to use their favorite color of marker to mark someone's test. And at the top of the page, they have to write Lukul Am, which means excellent. And they have to sign their name at the bottom when they mark someone's paper. And their marking got so good that I just would skim through it. And the way they gave feedback was just so positive and so reinforcing that I don't think any of them became alienated with the idea of being tested for their knowledge or having to mark someone else's work. This is the objective here was for the Grade 10 Social Studies Video and Film Festival. Of course, there were choices here. You chose your teammate. You chose the video that you were going to do. You had to evaluate the production. And of course, we had to increase the vocabulary of the children here such that when they went to teach someone their knowledge, which they have to do, they have to teach the knowledge in order to show that they learned something. And that's another theory from Dr. Vasquez's class, is that you will only know that the children have learned what you taught them when they can go and teach another person what they learned. And so they learn some multimedia vocabulary here. When you go to the library, they're given a day just to look at all the different visual aids that are in the media productions. They have their whole day, their class period plus any time, and the librarian knows already that the students are going to be doing really important work here, and to give them as much support as you can. And so what they do is they walk through the idea after we find a video. And I'm the one that gives them, we have to go from the known to the unknown. And so there was a video clip of that Bruno Drusi logging thing that they had as a series on TV, and it has 2 or 3 Aboriginal actors in there. We look at that. I asked them questions about it. I will show part of the clip. I'll stop it and then we discuss a little piece of it. Anyway, what does so and so wear, and how does he talk? What do you like about him? And they all liked how this young man had long hair and he tied it back, and they really liked that. So they're evaluating and they're making little judgments. And then the next day, next period, I showed them a long production. It's a really long production. And it has in there a person that does the voiceover is George Clooney. And this is the prologue to the Newcomers production by, I think it's Imperial Oil that produced it. The prologue is excellent, and we did the shoot in the Kicksand village at Hazelton. And some of the children that were in that video have been working. One of them is here in our Nisga'a government office. She's the executive assistant to the programs and services director. And she was a tiny little girl in that. And so I show them that, and we look at all the parts of it. And my objective here is that when they go to the library to look for their the production that they're going to look at, they're going to make they're going to discover that some of those were stereotypical, and there's some information that's not authentic. So I'm raising their awareness about how we were studied to death by a number of people like the anthropologists and some of the movie makers. I don't use that kind of term to them, but I explain to them that we really have to begin to reclaim our authentic selves. We don't, we don't live back in the 1800s anymore, but there are still like movies and stuff that weren't really all that acceptable. And so after they've unpacked the media production, they've evaluated it, we then have a noon-hour film festival. And it's in our social studies classroom, and the teachers are invited to have their lunch in there, and they're going to view the videos, and the students are going to walk them through the production. They're going to give an opinion of what they saw, and they're going to tell how they would change the information if they could. And the teachers really liked this. A couple of them came afterwards and said, that's a really great idea. I didn't know we had that in our library. I can use that. And so the children actually taught them how to, most of the work that they selected were those little slide tape things. And so we were able to show 2 slides per lunch hour. And so in 5 days, the teachers saw 10 productions. And they helped, it helped the students to be able to speak. And the cue I took to decide to do this was one of the legends is about Seth. And in one episode, he sent out to do a particular task. And the person that had to accompany him was somebody that was twice his size and twice his age. But this person, the instructions was that he was to follow Zach's directions. And Zach is like 13, 14 years old. And so I thought, well, if in our story, young people were taught that they have enough authority to lead an older person, why can't I do this in the classroom with our students? And so we did that, and the teachers really liked it, and the students liked it. And so I thought, I went to the grade 5 teacher and I said to her, would you like to have a longer social studies class for this week? And I explained to her what my students were doing. And so she said, yeah, let's do that. And the task for her students, when they were the pupils, when they were going to listen to the presentations of the grade 10 social class, was they had to listen so that they could give feedback. And the feedback, there had to be one good point that they gave the presenter. And it's at this time that I introduced a Nisga'a term. And the Nisga'a term is Ali's. It's spelled A-L-I-I-S, as in Sam, K-W. And Ali's means just a little bit. And so the children in the classroom had to use Ali's and make a suggestion for one small change in the presentation. And so when we went to the classroom, it went even better than it did with the teachers. Although the grade 10s were comfortable with the teachers, they were very warm toward the grade 5 students. And the children, they were so rapt in paying attention. The classroom, the regular classroom teacher for the grade 5 was astounded at the 100% active listening of the children in that class. And so this taught me another thing, that you can actually teach up or teach down depending on how much information you know and that you're comfortable with. And when it came to the Ali's, the grade 10s were very thankful to the grade 5s, because the grade 5s would say something like, your voice faded out at the end of your sentence. And then the feedback was, at least you could keep your voice the same all the way through the sentence. And the other one was, in some parts, you looked at the film instead of at us. And so they learned the new word eye contact. And it wasn't a child that gave them that information. It was the classroom teacher that gave them the information. It went very well. And the children, the little kids were just, they loved it, and they wanted to have more of these sessions with our students. And I think that's a really good way to reinforce learning and to groom children for public speaking and to be comfortable with whoever they are, and to be able to work productively with another person. when we're working with novel studies, I don't like to work them to death. And so what I do is I will use some of our own information. And then often in novel studies, I'm not sure how they're being done or if they're being done today, but they always ask you for setting, and they ask you for the sequencing and the describing the characters, learning the difference between a flat character and a round character. And so what I do with this, I will read parts of novels to them, those novels to them, and then they can read for themselves. But to reinforce the concepts, I will use Nisga'a characters, Nisga'a myth characters, and I'll read or I'll tell the story to them, and they love listening to these stories. And I make my voice as animated as possible, and I wander around the classroom while I'm telling the story, and I'll change my voice depending on who's talking. And in traditionally, none of these characters say anything, but I make them talk when I'm the one that's telling the story. And so then they learn it in this way. And to give Mouse Woman a rounded character is a real challenge to them. And so of course I bring something local today, and it's Mickey Mouse. And so we look at Mickey Mouse and we see what Mickey Mouse does and where Mickey Mouse lives, and then I tell them that, well, Mouse Woman is there, and she's a woman, and she's not like Minnie Mouse. I know that for sure, I said, because she's Nisga'a. And so they have to describe how the character traits of Mouse Woman. And then I tell them, that's about your age or your older brother's age. If you're having a hard time thinking of what kind of character Zach could be, why don't you describe somebody you know and call that person Zach? And it turns out really well. I'm using the known local, Mickey Mouse, and a brother or a friend. And then they go back into the character. And then they look at Mouse Woman, and she lives in the side of a hill, and she has it's described as a tunnel. And when I describe it to them, I just give them just a hint, and I say, Mouse Woman is magic. Mouse Woman is an engineer, and so now you have to describe where she lives, knowing that she's an engineer. And the descriptions are, I will introduce terms like foreground, background, overhead, below, to the left, to the right, something that they can use to describe a place. And I also tell them that traditionally the Nisga'a were very efficient with how they heated their homes, and they had a central fireplace, and so they know that now that although she's an engineer, she might have she does have a fireplace, but it might be an engineering type of fireplace. And so they go on and they describe all this. So this is they have to share their information, of course, with the classmates. And then they have to learn to speak publicly, and they have to learn how to be really active listeners. And they do a bit of creativity. And then what I did with them one afternoon, it was the last period in the afternoon, and I said, I think we're just going to do listening and telling story today. So we push all the chairs aside, and we sit in a circle on the floor, And I tell them, I'm going to go first, but you have to listen very carefully. I'm going to be able to know if you've listened. And so I tell them that they have to tell me back the story, which they do. And to reinforce the learning and to add a bit of creativity, I tell them, okay, now add one detail to your story. And it went really well until I got to one student. And of course, Zach is really upset because the wolf pack has stolen the bear from their smokehouse. They had just butchered it, and him and his Titi, his granny, had hanged him in the smokehouse to dry. And the wolf pack steals it. So to get energy, he wanders around until he gets enough courage to go after the wolf pack. And he goes after the wolf pack. Anyhow, this one child, when he spoke, he was sitting directly to my right, he said. And before Zach went, he needed more courage. So he lit up a joint and he took a few totes, and then he went after the wolves. And then of course my whole well-planned lesson is collapsed all over the floor as everyone is laughing. And I'm so glad he did that, because then I was able to teach him that yes, add detail, but don't make fun of that, because when you do that, you make fun of yourself. Anyhow, I gave them homework. I said, the Nisga'a did have something that had would induce a simultaneous reaction into their bodies. I said, go home and find out what it is. And the next day, nobody was able to tell me what it was. So they all got 0 on their homework that day. I think this is my last slide. Anyway, often in the summer, students have to get summer jobs, and they sometimes work in offices. And so I thought this would be a good way to teach them some of the process and protocols that they might need if they go to work in one of the different buildings. And so I decided that I would teach them the ethics of research and process of collecting and saving information. And this is what we did. And to sum it up, the displays were excellent. The interviews had to be at least half an hour, and the school supplied the tapes, and those little throwaway cameras, and that's what we used there. And I taught them, we practiced in class how to do a tape recording using those big old, those desk size, not desk size, you know those little tape recorders that they used to have. And we practiced using that. And they practiced interviewing with each other. Where are you from? Who's your favorite person? etc. And then in that same class, I had to make sure that they did an authentic presentation when they introduced a person. And I was so glad when we did this particular exercise that one of the very best students in the class, someone who's meticulous with his work, made a mistake. And I think the influence had to be the colonial influence that made him decide to do what he did. He collected the information. He wrote a beautiful draft of the brief biography of his grandmother. And the part that he focused on was her account of how she and her grandmother went out and harvested cedar bark. And at this time, she was 5 years old, and her grandmother was showing her for the first time how to harvest cedar bark. What they had to do was to go in the canoe, cross the river, and this is in May when the river is getting quite swollen and it becomes quite swift, and this is at Dilactamix. And they row down the river, and her grandmother didn't have to row. She was more conscious of steering the canoe, make sure they get to the right place on the other side. And of course, there's a beautiful description of the whole process of harvesting, drying, and taking the bark back to the village. And then after I listened to the tape, I looked at the brief biography, and there was nothing about them going across in the canoe or coming back on the canoe, and yet there was a vivid description by this researcher's grandmother of what a struggle it was to go back upriver in the rapid water. All of that was missing. And so when I asked this young, and I was so glad he made this mistake, when I asked this person, I said, how come you left out that part about your grandmother and your great-grandmother traveling in a canoe? And he was very uncomfortable, and he said, somebody might laugh at me when they found out that my grandmother and great-grandmother traveled by themselves in a canoe. It's the guys that run the boats, he said. And I said to him, you know what you did? And he said, no. I said, you made your Oatly and your Gigi almost invisible. And they're women, you know that. And they're very strong, but you left out the strength. And he became really upset because he's so used to having great marks, eh? So I said to him, how much of a mark shall I give you for this? And he said, well, it's only just a few minutes. I said, the weight of the information, that's what I'm looking for. And he said, whatever, and he marched off. And he got a C on that paper because his mind was still closed. But I was happy that he did do well, but I was happy that he had made that mistake. And it's the same with the boy that talked about that. I was really happy that he made the mistake he did.
Do you want to say something?
And there it is.
Oh.
The bottom line is you go from what the child knows and you build the knowledge on the knowledge. And that's how the children will learn. I want to thank Corinne McKay for teaching me how to edit, but she did all the editing for me. I want to thank Stephanie Missick, our in-house legal counsel, who took time from her very busy schedule to show me how to use PowerPoint. I want to thank Nancy Wells, our superintendent, for giving me the information about the Fraser Institute data on School District 92. And Carrie, Assistant Superintendent Carrie Stewart, for making the information more presentable for me. And Executive Assistant Charlene Grandison for being the link between me and the board office, and she does that so well. I'd like to thank Peter from the Nisga'a Valley Health Authority and Paul, Peter Azak, and Paul Mercer, our communications expert from Listen's Governor. And I would like to thank the Nisga'a Valley Health Authority for agreeing to do this presentation in their building. Kabihi, which means that is all I will say.
Thank you so much, Shirley, for that amazing presentation. We've got some comments from the webinar participants saying, I like the use of the Nisga'a language. Beautiful presentation, thank you. Great presentation, thanks so much. You're so inspiring, Haichka. From the webinar participants, any more comments or questions for Shirley? Or on video conference, Bella, are you there? Any questions, comments? Shirley, we're getting lots more comments on webinar. Thanks so much, inspiring, and hope you allow us to access your PowerPoint. Thoroughly enjoyed listening to the story of learning and how it can be. Thank you, thanks for sharing. Thanks from Thunder Bay, great wisdom. Beautiful presentation with inspiring educational ways. Lovely presentation. We have a question from Leah Walker for you, Shirley. The question is, how many teachers at Nisga'a learn from you? I can see how it will help students.
Did we lose
Am I on? Okay. The learning is incidental as they contact me and ask me for information. And over the time that I was at Nisga'a Elementary Secondary School, some of the ways that they might learn is if I do an evaluation of their work and make suggestions for change.
Thank you, Shirley. More thanks from the webinar participants saying thank you for your inspiring and informative presentation. Well, thank you so much, Shirley, for sharing today. That was really wonderful, and I really appreciate your message of studying back to life and learning to love learning and helping students to come to learn the process of learning. I'd like to thank everyone who helped in preparing and getting this presentation set up. Thanks to the rest of the UBC Learning team and Stefan for the technical support, and the First Nations Health Authority eHealth team for their support as well. Just want to wrap up again by saying thank you so much, Shirley, for the wisdom and the really inspiring and educational presentation that you provided today. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
All right, on time.
Yes.